Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, you know, this is a spectacular visit in a sense because we are looking at a road show, we are looking at a massive stadium, we're going to have cultural diplomacy at its best. What this really signifies in terms of diplomacy, is this the new normal in a sense? One would ask, because there used to be a time when diplomacy was a quiet affair, conducted between diplomats, between governments, behind closed doors. But people are participating in what would seem like cultural diplomacy today. How significant is that?
Yeah, Mark, you're right. I mean, this is a spectacle as a statecraft, and the two have merged. And I think a lot of this, the credit for transforming the very practice of diplomacy and making it much more public, open, social media and made for television, these two individuals today who are at the centerpiece of the world's attention, Donald Trump and Narendra Modi, both of them, are really 21st century figures in the sense that they have been able to tap into hundreds of millions of followers on Twitter and on all other platforms, and of course television. And I think the idea is that by showcasing something like this in such a dazzling manner, it captures public attention. So you're right, diplomacy used to be closed doors, behind the scenes, always, stovepipe bureaucrats, fighting over a fine text of language. But here, oratory. Here you have like hundreds of, thousands of people attending rallies. So politics, which used to be confined largely to domestic arena, is now being played at the global stage, and there, in fact, they were saying all politics is local, but now in a way, in the era of Modi and Trump, all politics become global, and this is being aired around the world. Television channels across the planet are, curious to know what's happening.
And public opinion matters, isn't it?
Public opinion matters, and see, end of the day, it's also sending a signal to third and fourth and fifth countries, and that's the whole idea of a strategic partnership. Sakal and Mark, if two countries call themselves strategic partner, it means the two are having an impact on a wider region, and it's not just purely bilateral,
so
right, between the two.
It really on a radar when it comes to world economy, and both countries are being seen or looked up or looked as consequential trade partners. It makes a lot of difference to the world at large, whatever happens between India and US in terms of trade. Sreeram?
Sakal, it is a major relationship. We have $150 billion of bilateral trade we're talking about, and tens of billions of FDI as well. And of course, General was mentioning there are major defense deals and such things. So yes, we are dealing at a very high level in the sense like all the interactions, right from this, display of Bonhomie in Ahmedabad to the nitty-gritty agreements, everything is of a certain order, and in that sense, it has a global significance, right? So it's not like even for that matter, we have very good relations with Japan and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Also, we have hosted in Ahmedabad before, but the level rises to another stage now because the US, right? So when Prime Minister hosted Xi Jinping of China in Ahmedabad, or Donald Trump, it goes to different, because these are two big great powers in today's time. So as an emerging power that wants to become a great power, for us to be neck and neck with Donald Trump or with Xi Jinping, it sends a signal that our Prime Minister is leading our country to our desired destination of becoming a leading power in the world. And frankly, in today's age where soft power and influence and impressionistic minds have to be captured,
do you agree?
This is the sign.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, you were mentioning a little earlier that a strategic partnership has significance for more than just a bilateral relationship. Now, in the context of the India-US strategic partnership, what are the areas, and which areas do you think this particular visit should be focusing on, and which are the countries or the regions that should be taking attention, that should be noticing what is happening? That's what's going to happen today.
Well, Mark, just rejoinder to what General Kadoch was just saying. Also, we have shed a lot of inhibitions and hesitations under Prime Minister Modi, because earlier we were still, stuck in that non-alignment mindset, and we were worried about, being seen as tilting towards one major power or the other. But what has happened since 2014 is we have been very decisive. For example, both the Lemova and the Comcasa, the two big, foundational agreements have happened under the Prime Minister's watch, you know. We had been vacillating over these things before. And so I think what is to come, I think with Trump, there is always the question of, he is more like a bilateral and transactionalist politician. So there have been a lot of questions about whether he is fully committed to, advancing the strategic partnership. But what we've done is we've done our homework well with the broader American system. As as Dr. Jaishankar often says, my goal is to remind our, counterparts across the US system that we have shared interests. And so Trump is coming, but so is a whole entourage coming, and then there is going to be the follow-up, and that's where the proof of the pudding lies. Because when Obama came in 2015 January as our Republic Day chief guest, there was a joint declaration for a vision for the Indo-Pacific and the Indian Ocean, and that was very clear, Mark. We laid out a vision for free and open Indo-Pacific, and which is still continuing, and also that we don't want hegemony of any other major power in our region. So I think that is very clear. So there is a China angle to what the two countries do together, and one would hope that that will continue under Trump.
So you talked about China, Dr. Sreeram. Well, he managed to seal that trade deal with China, and if he manages to seal the much anticipated trade deal with India, that's also going to be seen as a stamp as far as his domestic policies back home is concerned, because let's just face this. This is important for him as well, because many would say that, well, yes, it is an election trip or election tour of Donald Trump. It is looking at shoring up his political capital, the Indian Americans I'm talking about back home.
Yeah, Sakal, surely Trump wants more and more trade victories and to showcase them. And in that sense, India is important for him, and he will want to put this also in his bag, in his kitty before the election. So I do expect that some announcement of a deal will be happening before November when he goes to elections. But the other strategic area which I just wanted to mention was Afghanistan. It's very clear that Trump wants to pull out and or withdraw and draw down significantly. So we had been relying on NATO presence there in Afghanistan for last 19 years, since 2001. And now, in many ways, Trump wants the baton to be passed on to the regional power, saying, you handle it, I'm out of this. So I think the onus is on us. We would like to coordinate with the US how this withdrawal or drawdown that they are doing, that they're planning to do in the coming years, how we could fill the vacuum and how we could fill in the gaps being created by the exit of the US and of NATO forces there. So Indo-Pacific, Afghanistan, trade, all these are very central. And with trade also we are sending a message, right? There are some core interests on which we are not going to budge easily, but we have been trying to accommodate some of the US concerns. That is a sophisticated diplomacy of Dr. Jaishankar and our Prime Minister, where we are not trying to be confrontationist with the US on trade, but at the same time we are explaining to them our own vulnerabilities too. Domestically we have lots of constituencies that are opposed to opening up some sectors, and we cannot afford to do that, politically as well as economically. So I think we are now in a slowdown period economically. We need the trade deal as much as Trump does, so I think we should be working towards it proactively. And Trump probably is a very impressionistic and off the cuff type of politician. I wouldn't be surprised if he's saying we are already close and we're going to do it soon or something like that on this trip.
Usage of word tatpar.
The Sakal, our Prime Minister, suppose he's on the verge of landing in Israel, he tweets in Hebrew. If he's going to Saudi Arabia, he tweets in Arabic. If he's going to Iran, he tweets in Farsi. Right, so
he has done Donald Trump has taken a cue from our Prime Minister.
Well, he has got on his
personal touch.
He has got on his staff obviously Hindi conversant people, of Indian origin as well. So I'm sure it's part of the planning, to create the excitement and to make it, build up. Because as I said before, this is not a government to government interaction alone. There's a government to people. There's this whole public diplomacy element here, And frankly, people would not care if it was in English as much as it was in Hindi, because he's visiting Agra, right? This is the heart of northern India, where and he's coming to Delhi. So this is where millions and millions of people will admire the fact that that it's a sign of respect for India, and for our national language.
Donald Trump means to say that I'm going to meet Mark in India right away, and I am en route, and I'm going to meet everyone there. If one has to just quickly translate that bit of a tweet of Donald Trump in Hindi into English, but Lieutenant General, the messaging and lot of homework, lot of groundwork has been done. The joint production when we talk about the defense alignment or defense engagements between India and US, and that's going to get a major boost, and specifically like you rightly mentioned, Major General, under Make in India program. But Sreeram, also when we talk about Make in India, well, also the thought that comes to my mind is ecosystem as far as startups for both countries is concerned, and a lot of homework, lot of groundwork has been done from both sides. We might need them, but they do need us as well.
Yeah, you know, Sakal, President Trump is meeting with major business delegation tomorrow, I believe, in Delhi. And there is, you know, long-standing tradition of the two countries learning from each other, especially in the field of innovation. I mean, our IT industry in Bengaluru, for example, is intrinsically tied with Silicon Valley. You know, these two, our software exports, our services exports have largely looked at North America as the main destination, much more than Europe or any other part of Asia. So there is this element, and then we have a large number of our students going and acquiring higher technical degrees and education in US universities, and some of them wanting to come back now and set up their own industries here. Social innovation, this is an area where some of our universities are collaborating with US institutions. There is a lot of, you know, venture capital excitement about India among American philanthropists and capitalists, but there are also, you know, concerns about doing business in India. A great extent we have cleared those with the improving, you know, ease of doing business rankings. You know, under Prime Minister Modi's leadership, we have jumped a long way, but we are still you know, not as good as China, for example, which is around 40 in the world rankings. So the moment you come down to 30, 40, 20 range, I think that is the goal of our Prime Minister in the next coming years, then we become far more attractive for investors, and then, you know, the startup environment will catch fire. But certainly, I mean, we have to learn from countries like Israel or the US, because this is where young people with bright ideas and with a conducive environment of financing have suddenly been able to, you know, sitting in a basement and starting these, you know, world beating new ideas that can capture markets. Our young people, often Prime Minister, when he goes to the US, Sakal, he does hackathons, and he, you know, he participates in these Silicon Valley events because he wants to convey to the message that we want to draw the scientific establishments and the innovative capabilities in the civilian side also, not just in the defense side, closer together.